This episode is brought to you by
Cry Havoc, from New York Times #1 bestselling author Jack Carr. Cry Havoc, a Tom Rees thriller. Order now.
The bell tolled louder. He tried to think, but there was no thought. Only an overpowering human instinct. Survival. Without hesitation, Langdon yanked open the window and climbed up onto the sill. The blast of cold air and snow rushing past him did nothing to quell his panic. It's your only choice. He stepped to the edge of the windowsill. Then, taking a deep breath, Langdon launched himself out into the darkness.
So this book club podcast exists really to encourage reading, love of books, people to build their libraries. Because for me, reading has been foundational to everything, whether it was me going into the SEAL teams or what I'm doing now as an author. And just to see, it breaks my heart to see how reading is just on such a steep decline.
Yeah.
So this podcast exists to encourage reading and people to buy books and put the phones away and spend some time in the pages of an incredible novel. And you've been such a huge inspiration to me. I am just I'm a huge admirer of your work and everything that you've created. Actually read Da Vinci Code, found you through Da Vinci Code, which a lot of people did. In 2004 in Iraq. I was in Iraq, and that was my escape, was to get into the pages of these thrillers. And I found Da Vinci Code immediately, of course, go to Angels and Demons, and I'm just blown away by everything that you've done previously and since. So thank you.
That's very kind, and thank you for your service both to the country and also to libraries and books. I mean, both of them worthy causes. So thank you.
Absolutely, and I think our libraries might have a couple of similarities in that there might be a passageway. I think, I don't know if it's in that room or
It
not.
is actually. I could probably. I don't know if you want me to show it to you. I could probably. It's here. Hold on.
Oh wow! Oh my goodness!
So I don't know if you see this.
Wow! Amazing! Oh, that is
That's
incredible!
why we're doing this. I mean, if we're looking to be interesting and
Wow,
creative here,
that's incredible.
I will show you. Oh, that's Winston. Say hi.
Hey, Winston, how are you, buddy?
So this goes out to a garden.
Oh,
This
wow.
here is all of the, not all of the, but some of the props from the movies.
Wow,
The
that's amazing.
cryptex and
Yeah, I
the
see it.
antimatter canister that they took out of the Vatican and all of that.
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
this is incredible.
here you go, Winston.
Wow, Winston. Winston looks like a happy dog.
He's a really happy camper. I'm very, very lucky. Yeah, I don't know if you have dogs, but
I
this guy's
do.
my best friend in the world and great companion when I'm writing.
It's fantastic. We have Scout, Swiss Mountain Dog, who's downstairs, who may bark during this. We might hear the
Sorry.
bark echo up the stairs into the library here. But did you see that Washington Post article recently that came out? I think it was republished in the Times about why so few Americans are now reading for pleasure these days.
No, I didn't.
It's a
I would
couple
be
weeks
interested to
old.
know.
Yeah, it came a couple weeks ago. Actually, Daniel Silva sent it to me, and it just talks about how, as a society, we are pushed to just consume and consume so quickly, and so even in schools, and I'm sure not at your alma mater, but at other schools, kids are reading just summaries of these books rather than actually reading the texts themselves.
Yeah.
And it is brutal. It is just it's
They are strange days. And the crazy thing is, you look at a novel like Terminal List, and like how many people consume the novel compared to consume the show? And the question is, who knows? I mean, it's all storytelling. It's different media. And you're right. We are in this time when we just are, it's instant gratification. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I write for a lot of hours, and at the end of the day, and I read just a ton, but it's all nonfiction for work, really. And by the end of the day, I've been staring at, nonfiction books and my own work. It's like the last thing I'm going to do at the end of a day is read for pleasure. It's just like, I just read for 12 hours. I'm like, let me pull up a show. or let me go with friends, or let me go, play tennis, or whatever it is that, the other things that people do. But you're very right that this instant gratification almost feels like books it's too slow, which is too bad.
It's yeah, especially when you're someone who's new to this, stepping into publishing. Of course, it's exceedingly depressing. And I think heard Lee Child say once someone asked him what he was most looking forward to about retirement,
Right.
doing them in conjunction with his brother now, the Reacher series. But he said, "I'm looking forward to reading for pleasure." And I understand that now. How many people ask for blurbs? So a lot of times I'm going through a book really quickly, but that's not reading for pleasure. That's not enjoying the book. That's just making sure it's not awful. Giving,
That's right.
giving it a blurb.
Yeah. But not awful is really not the blurb they're looking for.
No, that's not what they're looking for. That's not what I'm going to give them because this is art and it's subjective, of course. So someone's going to love it. But I just go through to make sure it's not absolutely awful. And oftentimes I say, oh, I wish I could spend more time in these pages. What I do, which is the excuse also, one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is so that I have an excuse to do that, to just put everything else aside, to sit down and enjoy books the way I used to when I was growing up, enjoying them just for pleasure. And what was interesting about all that, and I'm curious if it was the same for you, is that and for me growing up in the 80s, it was reading thrillers by David Morrell, Nelson DeMille, A.J. Quinnell, J.C. Pollock, Mark Olden, Louis L'Amour. And a lot of these guys, Tom Clancy, a lot of these guys had protagonists with backgrounds that I wanted in real life one day. So they typically had a Vietnam veteran who was a
Sure.
Army Special Forces, CIA paramilitary, Marine sniper, something like that. And now in the 80s, he's in a contemporary thriller. He's either working for the CIA or a private investigator or a police officer or whatever that is. But his background gives him the skills he needs to solve problems in present day. But I was really just a fan. And I was approaching it from that perspective, obviously. But when looking back on it, those guys were really my professors in the art of storytelling at a very impactful time in my life, that age, let's say 8 to 18, somewhere in there.
Sure.
And that's the foundation. And I feel so fortunate that I wasn't just had all these other distractions. But I'm curious, you growing up where you did, which was a very unique upbringing at Exeter. Wonder what that was like for you growing up. And I know you didn't have a TV. Is that right? Growing up?
That's right. It's funny. I mean, I grew up on the campus of a prep school where it was cool to learn. I mean, it didn't occur to me my dad was a teacher, my mom was a music teacher. All of the adults around me were teachers. My babysitters were students from all over the world. I mean, all different religions and colors and languages. And really, even the concept of racism, I didn't even know about until I went off to college. It's like, oh, wait, there are people who don't get along because they're different colors. I had no idea. And it was this incredible world where every question was not a good question, but every question was welcome. And if the person didn't know the answer, they'd go get it for you. And so when it came time to write a hero, he was a teacher, obviously. I mean, that's, we all, most of us look around us for the heroes in our life. And I've been a teacher. And it's funny, you and I are very different. I know nothing about combat or weapons or the military. All of it terrifies me, to be totally honest. And so I had a character who literally in the Sony Pictures document said he cannot know how to shoot a gun. He cannot learn jujitsu. He can't just take down a guy physically. It always has to be in a cerebral way. And so that was sort of the reflection of my upbringing, the reflection of who I wanted to be. And much like you and your characters, my character is sort of the guy I want to be. You're much closer to your character than I am to mine, to be honest.
I don't know about that, but
well, it's funny because Langdon, we have the same passions, the same interests in art and architecture and history and all that. But I always say, he's so much smarter than I am. And so he said, that makes no sense because everything that he says, you have to think of. And then you have to clarify that, look, when he walks by a painting and gives an off the cuff, perfect analysis, that took me 2 days to write. So,
Yep.
So I'm sure you know the drill.
Oh, I do, exactly. My protagonist, James Reese, he's faster, stronger, smarter, better looking, wittier than I could ever hope to be. That's one of the things I like about writing, actually, is that you can think of those things when you walk away. Everybody has them. When you walk away from an argument or some sort of, some doesn't have to be an argument, but it's a conversation. You walk away and you think 5 minutes later, oh, that would have been the perfect thing to say in that instance. but it was 5 minutes too late. It's gone now. You're already in the parking lot or
Writing is the big do-over. You
exactly.
just get to do it over and over until you get it just right. And of course, your hero gets it right the first time, and we mere mortals at our computers get it right on edit number 7.
Exactly. One of the reasons I'm a writer, author instead of a public speaker. I don't. I'm not good at that. I'm good in conversation. I'll do things in conversation, and I get
Sure.
asked to do speaking events all the time, and I say no to everything unless it's in conversation with someone.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That's so much fun.
And then you also don't have to write a speech, which is really
Exactly.
nice.
That's true as well, which takes a long time because then you stress over it. You're supposed to be writing a book. So
Yeah.
the time that I have done it early on, it just takes time away from the bandwidth that should be going into my most current novel. Um, your book tours, when did they get so, I mean, I'm guessing it's with Da Vinci Code, but when did they get so international in scope? And to see you this time, I think I wrote it down here, that 2 US stops, and then you're Prague, Copenhagen, Hamburg, Gothenburg, Helsinki, Paris, Milan, Madrid, and Amsterdam.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
that's just this fall. Next spring we're going to do it again in Asia. So, yeah, it's funny. It's incredible that like about 75, maybe more than 75% of my readership is overseas. I mean, I have a huge readership in the US, but the vast majority of my business is overseas. And I don't know whether the Europeans react because I write so much about Europe. Strangely, the largest per capita readership that I have is in India and Singapore.
Interesting.
So I mean, I guess maybe they're bigger readers. I mean, Germany are they're big readers. So I enjoy that. You've had this experience where you do what you do alone in the dark, in your pajamas with your dog, sort of in your cup of coffee, just saying, I hope this works. And you just grind and grind and grind until you say, you know what, now it works. And then all of a sudden they put a spotlight in your face and say, go be fascinating. And you're like, I haven't talked to anybody in 8 years.
It seems
So
like 8 years, yes.
yeah, this book took 8 years to write.
Wow. Wow. Was it 8 years ago that your last book came out?
Yeah, Origin was 8 years ago.
Oh my gosh, it
I
seems like
know.
yesterday. Things have
Yeah,
gone at warp speed. Things have turned into one long day for me since I left the
yeah,
military and stepped into the publishing world. That's incredible.
yeah.
Wow. And during that time, how much travel did you do? And how much of that was part of research or part of or just for fun? And how much of what was fun turned into research? What is that like? All that you're
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a blurred line between the two because I enjoy the research so much. When I knew I was going to write about human consciousness, I said, well, it has to be Prague. Prague is the mystical capital of Europe since the days of Emperor Rudolph II, when he invited all of the mystics and alchemists and Kabbalists and seers and scryers and mediums, and they all came to Prague because he had this feeling that he could learn from the other dimensions, with not even just talking to the dead, just the wisdom of the ages could be pulled in, and that he could be a better ruler. And ever since then, Prague's just been this like melting pot of mystical thinking and philosophy. And so I sort of knew it had to be set there. And beyond that, I love to use location as a character in these novels. And you really, if I've done my job, you get immersed in Prague or wherever I happen to set the book. And Prague as a character is just, it is so perfect for Langdon. It is endless libraries, with secret passageways, dark alleyways, towers and spires and cathedrals and tombs, and it's all there. And so there's sort of no shortage of great backdrops for action.
Yeah. Oh, I love Prague. I've been there twice. The physical copy of your latest book is arrived this. I think it's arrived this morning at my mail drop. So I got the PDF of it, and I don't want to give too much away because the podcast will drop so close to publication date.
Yeah.
But is the Four Seasons? I love the backdrop, and is the Four Seasons really close enough to the river where Robert Langdon can do what he does in those early chapters? Or
It was.
wow, wow. Because when I was there, I was not
It
staying
is
at the
no
Four
more. It is no more. There was a small alleyway that is now. Let me just put it this way: he would have to be an incredible athlete to actually hit the water
Make
from
that
that
leap.
particular window. It's funny because I stayed in that suite on book tour for Origin or something. I can't remember what it was. It was this beautiful royal suite overlooking the river, and at that point, it was much closer. And so I'm so funny you would ask this because in an early draft, I had him jump down, sort of hit an awning, and break his fall, sort of stumble to the ground, and then run and jump in the river. And I just thought, you know what? I am so accurate with location. I cannot, I cannot fudge this. And I really thought about it, and I thought, well, if the book had come out 10 years ago, this would have been accurate. And it's so much better that he jumped in the river. And you know what? Robert Langdon doesn't exist. You're reading this for entertainment. And it's funny that you would ask. I honestly think that is the only thing in the book that isn't absolutely accurate. And of course, a fellow author brings it up. Good eyes.
Well, also I remember where I was staying, and it was not the Four Seasons when I was there. If I'd go back, I'll stay in a nicer place. But I stayed there years and years ago, once well before the Navy and once while I was in. But it's such a beautiful place, such a beautiful location. And so at the end of Origin, as you're finishing something like that up, are you already thinking about next steps and next adventures for your protagonist? Or do you take a breath, or do you have a list of things that maybe came up as you're writing Origin over those years and you're keeping that in a file somewhere so you have some options as you move on? But what led specifically to the latest book, from the end of Origin to the book that's publishing right now, Secret Secret?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It's funny. So I've known I'm going to write about human consciousness for a long time. I wrote a book called The Lost Symbol about Washington, D.C. and the Masons, and Katherine Solomon, who is in this novel, was a character. In that novel, she was a noetic scientist, and she was sort of a tangential character, Robert's love interest, but not I didn't really delve into noetics too deeply. But as I wrote that character, I thought, oh boy, I mean, I've got to write about consciousness for real. And it took me, what turns out to be about 15 years to amass all the information. Of course, it's changing all the time because there's so much new science that's happening. And I really waited this long to know what I needed to know. And each one of these books is about a new topic that, I'm big surprise. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not a noetic scientist. I'm not a particle physicist. And so my job is to learn all of this to the point where I can feather it into a story in a way that's not only scientifically accurate, but is accessible to anybody, to somebody who knows nothing. I can't even spell consciousness. What is it? That sort of feeling. And noetic science is really about the study of the human mind, and specifically its ability to affect the material world, which most of us would say, well, that's not possible. And I agree. It feels absolutely impossible, and yet scientifically and quantitatively, it is entirely possible and happens around us every day. And this is a very optimistic book, just because I believe the new technologies we're developing and the new knowledge we're gleaning are going to change the face of society. It's going to change our perception of who we are and how we interact. And it's funny. I'm not so naive to think that it won't be used for evil, which is part of this book. Or at least used to impart your will. Maybe we'll say that's not necessarily evil, but just used as a tool of power. Whether you're talking about the wheel or fire or the computers, the human species has never created a technology that we have not weaponized. Every single thing we invent, we find a way to use it to increase our power, our physical power. And certainly our knowledge in the field of consciousness and all of that will be used similarly, and is being used similarly. But that doesn't mean that 99.9% of its usage won't be for good or for, I guess you would say, increasing our awareness of our connection to other people and to the natural world and to whatever this, the great beyond might be, and all those sorts of things.
The Sig Sauer P226X Legion, born from legacy, built for the modern shooter. Whether you're honing your skills on the range with the P226X Legion or carrying confidently with the P226X Legion Carry, the new Legion series delivers everything today's discerning shooter demands, right out of the box. With the new P226X Legion series, you're not just getting a firearm, you're entering a legacy of performance-driven excellence. This is the pistol for the modern shooter, refined, configurable, and crafted for excellence. Sig Sauer, never settle. Since 2003, Bravo Company Manufacturing founded by a U.S. Marine veteran in Heartland, Wisconsin, has been crafting mission-ready weapon components for professionals who demand reliability. Trusted by U.S. Special Operations, law enforcement, and responsible citizens worldwide, BCM gear is engineered and tested to perform in the most unforgiving environments. Every BCM tool is built and tested as if your life depends on it. Go to Bravo Company USA for more information. Bravo Company, American-made, duty-built.
I mean, I learned so much from your books, and I think you said something one time along the lines of, "I write books that taste like ice cream but have the nutritional content of vegetables," or something along those lines.
It was actually a librarian like your mom who came to me after reading, said, "You know what I love about your books? I feel like I'm eating my vegetables, but it tastes like ice cream." And I thought about it. I thought, like, was I just insulted? I said, no, I was just complimented. Like, that's what I'm trying to do.
It's great. It's fantastic. I love that. I took that on board, and I think about that as I'm writing too. And what I love about your books, what I love about all the great books that I've read throughout my life, is that when you say something, or even if you don't explain it fully, it's just a sentence in there. I think, oh, I should know about this. Like the first line in this one, I was not the first line of the book, but maybe 2 or 3 chapters in. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. The golem, is that the?
Yes.
I didn't know what one of those was somehow. So I'm like, well, it's obviously written in the first. You kind of explain it later, but the first time it's mentioned, I'm like, oh, I should know what this is, and so I looked it up.
That's great.
Yeah, and I love that. I've always done that when I was a little kid. I absolutely love that you do that.
Well, it's I love to feather real information in, or actually, I mean, the whole backdrop is from the real world, and the fun thing about the golem is he's so tied to the history of Prague. And there's this great parallel with, he's a protector. There's a character in the novel, as you know, that considers themselves a protector. But you're also talking about consciousness. And the legend of the golem, has to do with this giant clay figure, a monster made of clay that has no life until you write this magic symbol on its forehead, which is from history, and it comes to life. It's like infused with a consciousness in that moment, much like a radio being turned on or off. And so there's this other parallel with all the science. And he just seemed like the absolute perfect foil for Langdon's adventure. It was fun to write.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I love that. And I also love when you do things like this in the beginning. I actually looked up also if there was a speaker series in the Prague, the way you described.
Charles University, yes.
There's a few different speaker series in Prague. I found out when I looked that up. And I love when Catherine asks Robert, "Hey, what is or Robert?" He hands him the microphone, and he gets to ask the audience what the most, I guess, prolific symbol in the world is. And I thought, oh, geez, I should know that. So as a reader now, I'm thinking, I'm going to find out in a few sentences down, maybe, or next page. But I'm thinking in my head, like, oh my goodness, of course, everybody thinks a cross, a crucifix type of thing. Of course, that's how it plays out, and then it ends up being the halo. And I did not know that. I think it's fantastic how much you educate through the medium of popular fiction. And I think you're doing everyone a great service by doing that.
Oh, well, the fun thing about writing Langdon is he's skeptical, which means I can go to places that smart readers are going to say, I don't believe that. And so I'll say something and a reader will think, I'll have a Katherine Solomon said, let me tell you about precognition. And this is what happens. And most readers are going to go, that's ridiculous. That's impossible. And fortunately, Langdon at that moment says, that's ridiculous. That's impossible. Yeah. So you can relax as the reader and know, like, the author's not going to force you to believe this or trust that you. There's somebody by your side who's going to ask the question that's in the back of your mind every time. He's more skeptical than you are. And when he's convinced, by that time, you're convinced. And so you can kind of exhale and not need to wear that skeptical, well, I don't know about that hat, because somebody's already doing that for you.
That's genius. And I think I've read that you're a bit of a skeptic yourself, and people who haven't read backstories to your books or interviews might not know that, but you consider yourself more of a skeptic. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've written about, in this book, a lot of what we call paranormal phenomena, things like precognition, out-of-body experiences. And I've had people say, like, oh, you must have had some sort of mystical experience. No, I mean, I haven't. I started this book in a skeptical place. If you'd asked me 8 years ago, describe death, I'd be like, well, it's full stop. You fall asleep and you don't wake up. Blackness, you're unaware of anything, and that's it. And all of these sort of mythologies about heavens and hells and out-of-body experiences, it's wishful thinking or whatever it may be. And 8 years later, I have a totally different perspective That's not because I've had a near-death experience. That's because I've talked to countless people and read literally thousands of accounts of near-death experiences, and they're all the same. And there are so many medically documented examples of someone who is on an operating table, dies, is clinically dead for 10 or 15 minutes. They bring the person back. And the person says, no, I watched the whole thing. I was hovering above my body. I saw the whole thing. And the doctor said, no, you didn't. Your eyes were taped shut. And the person says, listen, I'm telling you, the guy with the green shirt came in with this machine, and then you did this, and then you did, and he said that. And the doctors say, you're right. There was no brain activity. Your heart had stopped. Your eyes are taped. We don't know how you know any of this. And we don't understand this notion of a consciousness outside the physical body. So our current model of consciousness is local consciousness, meaning that, as you know, all of your hopes and dreams and fears, what makes you you, is the product of chemical processes in your brain. You create consciousness. The problem is there's so many anomalies to suggest that's not true, that we're at this moment in history when our model for consciousness being created by the brain is falling apart. Much the same way, in the days of Copernicus, we thought the Earth was at the center of the solar system, but there were anomalies. People are saying like, that star should be over there. This planet shouldn't have risen yet. Something's wrong here. Our model screwed up. Yeah. Well, let's put the sun at the center. Let's change everything. And all of a sudden it all worked. That's where we are right now with human consciousness. And all of these anomalies, sudden savant syndrome, you get hit in the head with a baseball. Some kid in Arizona gets hit in the head with a baseball, wakes up speaking Mandarin Chinese fluently. Somebody slips on the ice who's never seen a violin and becomes one of the greatest violinists in the world overnight. It's not possible. A baseball cannot impart an entire language into your brain. So at some point you have to say, our model is off. We don't understand what's going on. And that's a pretty exciting moment in history if you think of how critical the understanding of human consciousness is to our life experience. It's the lens through which we see ourselves, other people, we process reality. I just think we're on the verge of an astonishing shift in our view of ourselves and our connection to other people.
That's one of the reasons that I am so excited for people to read this book. If people haven't read you, find you with this one, then go back to the beginning and read them all and have that experience. Put down the phone, put the computer away, sit in front of that fire with your favorite drink, and read these books or listen to them. But I heard some people now are listening to books on like 3 or 4 speed. Once again, going back to that consumption thing, and which I don't recommend because these narrators are so good these days. They're actors and they impart so
Right.
much. So I encourage people to just listen to them if they're listening on the regular speed to get the full experience.
Thank you for saying that. I just gave an Audible interview and they said, what's the best speed to listen at? I was like, the speed the narrator chooses, obviously. It's your performance. If you wanted to go back by faster, pick up the book and read it.
Yep.
I just thought, well, I didn't even know what to say. I wasn't aware that people listened at high speed.
People do. And once again, goes back to that Washington Post article about that consumption society and how one just needs more and more and more, faster and faster and faster. And it's crazy. So I know growing up, you had Christmas morning, there were puzzles and ciphers and hunts and these sorts of things. And then today, these things obviously impacted your life and your writing and these amazing stories. But do you like now coming up with puzzles or solving them? And how often are you solving ones from other people, or is that part of this? Is it all part of kind of one journey?
Yeah, it's all related. We love that aha moment. It's why people do, the Wordle or crossword puzzles or even just board games. We like that moment. We go like, oh, that's what it is. Yes, it feels good. As you just intimated, I grew up where treasure hunts were fun. On Christmas morning, I come down and there are no presents. There's just an envelope with a code or a riddle or something that would, if you solve it, it points to a different room in the house and you find your other clues and you just keep following it and then you finally find your present. So for me, codes and treasure hunts were always fun. My dad's a mathematician. That is a symbolic language. My mom's a professional musician. That's a symbolic language. And I remember when I was thinking of writing my first book, Digital Fortress, it was astonishing because it was in the late 90s and literally, they said only 2% of the population had ever heard of NSA, National Security Agency. Mm-hmm. And I had decided for a whole number of reasons that I wanted to write a book about them. And I just, out of curiosity, went to my dad and said, "Hey, have you ever heard of National Security Agency?" My dad sort of smiled. He's a mathematician, and when he graduated from Harvard, he said, I was recruited by NSA, but I came to Phillips Exeter to teach. And let me tell you what I know, which is pretty much nothing." So I read Jane Spanford's The Puzzle Palace, and ended up sort of, you have it, of course. What a great book. And ended up talking to a lot of former cryptologists through anonymous read mailers through Finland. It was just sort of this crazy thing. And that's really when I thought, oh, codes. That's the reason I'm interested in this is my love of codes. And so in all of these books, and this one included, there are always puzzles to solve. And the real challenge isn't writing the puzzles, it's how do you make them relevant to the plot? Because the only way anyone is going to find a puzzle interesting in fiction is if the hero has no choice but to solve it. Then all of a sudden there are stakes, and then we're really interested. If it's just sort of a tangential, well, Langdon recalled this puzzle and here it was, it doesn't matter. But if there's an obstacle that has a code that you have to solve to get through it, then it's doubly fun. You get the intellectual experience of solving the code, but you also get the narrative thrill of, okay, we're moving on.
Mm-hmm. How much does music influence your writing? I know after you graduated from college, you went out to LA. You were involved in the music industry. Some of your music was incorporated into the Da Vinci Code, the film with Tom Hanks, of course. And so, what were those years like between the publication of your graduating from college and the publication of your first novel? And what were those years like? And did you always know that you were going to write thrillers, that you were going to write these kinds of books or books in general?
I didn't have a TV, and growing up, it was like, you're going to learn how to play music and read. And that's what I did as a kid. And that's all I did. And in college, I studied creative writing and music, music composition. And those were the two things I spent all my time doing. So when I graduated from college, I thought, I want to be creative with my life. I don't know what that means. I'll either go make music or I'll go write books. And I thought, at 20 years old, you're like, music's going to be way more fun. So I, piled all my stuff in this old car and drove out to Los Angeles. And actually, I can't really even fathom this happened, but I got a record deal. And I was a pianist, a singer-songwriter, basically. Got a record deal, made a record with the British Record Producer of the Year, this guy named Barry Fosman, who'd worked with Billy Joel and Air Supply, all these people, this incredible band from Michael Jackson, Madonna, all these players. And the record came out and sold, I don't know, like 12 copies. And that may be generous. I think my mom bought 10 of them.
Oh, they're worth something now.
They just tanked. It was, and in listening to it years later, I thought, oh yeah, it wasn't that good. It was the reality. Also, it was the timing. It was right at the beginning of the rap craze, and it was the least cool music anybody could imagine. So at that point, I thought I had an idea for a novel. And it related to something that happened at Phillips Exeter. I was teaching summer school, and the U.S. Secret Service showed up on campus and detained a student, an exchange student from Germany, and thought that he was a threat to the president. I'm thinking, this 14-year-old kid, what are you talking about? This was at the dawn of the internet. I think it was, we were on AOL, which I can't remember. It was just right, CompuServe, right at the beginning. And he had sent a message to a friend in Germany say he didn't like the president and thought the guy should be shot. Thought he had terrible policies, just be shot. Just a throwaway comment. Well, they found out about the email and came and interviewed him and said, okay, there's no problem, and they left. But I remember asking, wait, I thought email was private. How did they know? And that's when I really started talking to my dad about the National Security Agency, read Banford's book, and realized that there was this really fascinating world between civilian privacy and national security. And you can argue both sides of the equation. You say, like, look, and I remember talking to a former NSA cryptologist, said, look, you can complain all you like, but in whatever year it was, 1995, our ability to read faxes and emails has thwarted 2 U.S. terrorist attacks on our soil. And that's when I instantly had the idea for the book to say, oh, there's this gray area. And you do that so well. I mean, you understand that there's this gray area where you can argue both sides of an equation. And that's what makes great fiction and a great landscape for an interesting book where maybe the villain's doing the wrong thing for the right reason, which is always exciting and challenging.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. And how did you go from writing the book to having a completed manuscript? I'm assuming you had the completed manuscript first. Maybe not, but how did you go from there to finding an agent or getting a publisher? What was
Yeah.
that journey like in there?
Yeah. So it was kind of funny. I was a musician living in Los Angeles, and Phillips Exeter called and said, "Hey, look, at the end of every alumni magazine, there's a little piece, a two-page piece by a former alum who's just doing something interesting. And would you write that?" I said, "Sure." So I wrote about what it was like to be this like preppy, geeky kid living in the middle of like heavy metal Hollywood. And it was called Goodness and Knowledge on the Sunset Strip. And it was sort of humorous, but it was insightful. And I didn't think anything about it. And I got a call from a literary agent, this guy named George Weiser. And he said, "Hey, somebody in our office had this magazine and they liked this piece and showed it to me. And I represent Mario Puzo. I placed the Godfather. Have you thought of writing a novel?" I said, "A novel? No, I'm a musician. I'm a very serious musician." He goes, "Actually, you're a novelist. You don't know it yet." This is a true story. And I said, "Yeah, okay, fine." And about a year later, I had this idea for a novel. Actually, he said, "When you decide to write novels, call me." So I sat down, I wrote the manuscript for Digital Fortress, really just saying what would happen in this story. And I'd read a ton of Robert Ludlum, and I mean, I'd read thrillers. And I called him and I said, I wrote a novel. He goes, Of course you did. I knew you would." He goes, "Send me the manuscript." He calls me 2 days later and says, this is after an enormous amount of failure in the world of music. He says, "Hey, I just showed this to St. Martin's Press. The first editor who saw it wants to buy it. And congratulations, you have a hardcover book deal." I thought, wow, book publishing is so easy compared to music. This is great. And so my novel, Digital Fortress, came out on St. Martin's Press, and about 12 people bought it. And I thought, oh no, it's all the same. And really, the book was not. I mean, to say it wasn't a commercial success is actually overselling it. It was a commercial failure. Bookstores bought it. I mean, libraries bought it. I sold maybe 2,000 copies total, no foreign rights, nothing. Went to a different publishing house, went to St. Martin's, Simon and Schuster, and wrote Angels and Demons. And just got caught up in a whole corporate mess there. And it was published very quietly, and nobody read that. You know, I sold maybe 20 copies. Wrote Deception Point, and nobody read that. And I remember writing the Da Vinci Code. I, at that point, went to Doubleday at Random House. And I remember reading they said, "We're going to print 10,000 advanced reading copies. We really believe in this book." I'd never had an advanced reading copy printed. I said, 10,000 ARCs is more than all of my real books combined. You're going to give them away? What are you doing? Like, I have to eat. I was a teacher at that time. And you know, and the rest, I mean, fortunately, it just found an audience. It was the right book at the right moment. I never changed a word in the other books. And of course, they all went to the top of the bestseller list just because the other one had found an audience. And it's just a great reminder for not only for authors, you know, young writers, but for anybody really in any field, not just the creative arts. Maybe it's a business idea, that just because something doesn't fly doesn't mean it doesn't have value, doesn't mean it won't work someday, doesn't mean you should quit. And so there was a lot of persistence, at least in my writing career, getting to the point where I had an audience. And after Da Vinci Code came out and was so big, I mean, life changed dramatically in some ways and not at all in other ways. I mean, you know the writing process. You sit down and you're looking at a blank page. Your characters do not care how many books you've sold. They don't care, you know, what big podcast you were just on. Like, nobody cares. You still have to do the work. And there's that added pressure of knowing that, oh, like, a lot of people are going to read this. And you've set an expectation of an entertaining book that ideally enlightens on some level or challenges. And so you're kind of hyper aware that what you're doing had better be good.
Wow. And you did have some publishing experience, I think, in some of those interim years, maybe, or maybe before. But there was a book of humor, I believe, maybe two. Are those out? Those are still out there?
Oh, I hope not. No, you know what? I was living in Hollywood and I went to the supermarket. It was called Ralph's. Anybody from Southern California knows that brand. It was called Rock and Roll Ralph's. And it was right on Hollywood Boulevard in the middle, in the thick of it, by the Mann Chinese Theater, right along that area. And I went and I was shopping and I saw this guy. He had like purple hair and spandex, and he was holding a little poodle that was dressed like in a tutu or just something crazy. And I thought, man, if I were a woman, like that would be a guy to avoid. Like that whole picture. And I just thought there are probably a lot of men to avoid. And I wrote a book called 187 Men to Avoid. And they were, men who dress their dogs, men who, eat macaroni and cheese more than 4 times a week. It was so dumb. And I just literally wrote it in a weekend and showed it to somebody at the National Academy of Songwriters, where I was spending a lot of time. And they thought it was very funny. And they said, "Can I send this to an agent?" I said, "Sure, but I mean, nobody's going to read this." And no, it sold for about the same amount of money I had made that year teaching. And I thought, okay, hold on a second. Not that I didn't love teaching, but I thought, note to self that, that success in publishing could actually pay the bills.
Yeah.
So far, that had not been my experience because I was in music. And I actually forgot about those. And I wrote them under a pseudonym. But of course,
right?
People like you have come back and dug up the truth.
Sorry, Daniela or something, I believe. Maybe there's a companion piece. Maybe some people are out there have been waiting 30 years for the 100 women you need to avoid.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Well, you can write that one. I'm going to stay away from that one.
Probably wise. I think you're doing
That's
okay.
Right.
And so, when you were reading growing up? You're reading at school, obviously, and then are your parents suggesting books? Are you finding books yourself? Are you getting recommendations from librarians? What kind of books are you reading growing up?
Yeah, I loved to read as a kid. I loved going to the library. I started, probably where most of us started, with like Richard Scarry and Maurice Sendak and sort of the children's books. Dr. Seuss I loved. And it was funny because my mom's, we didn't have a radio. We had a record player. And our record collection was my mom's, and it was all classical music. And so I actually was startlingly old, I don't know, 8 or 9 or 10 maybe, before I understood that I heard this group called the Beach Boys. I thought, what the heck is that? Like, that's music? That's amazing. I love that. It's classical music, but it's about surfing and cars and girls and these close harmonies. And it was just so fun. And I just became entranced with pop music at that point. And I really have no idea what question you just asked me. Now I'm hearing Beach Boys songs.
What was I asking you about? Well, we can move on anyway, because I wanted to ask you something else, and I know you're on the clock here. We only have a certain amount of time, and I really appreciate you spending this time with me. It's such a treat for me. But I also love how you weave into the current novel, Penguin Random House. I got to that chapter, a huge smile comes over my face as soon as I start reading. It's in the first sentence or two of that chapter, and you mentioned Jonas Falkman, of course, who is I guess a namesake maybe of your.
Well, Jason Kaufman is my editor and has been my editor forever, and so I like anagrams, and these books sometimes contain anagrams. So Jonas Falkman is an anagram of my actual editor, Jason Kaufman, and he is a character. And I've always wanted to write a thread of a novel set in a publishing company, just because I think I think they'd be interested to know how books are purchased. How are they edited? How are they manufactured? How are they kept secret? How are they marketed? All of that sort of stuff. And so I wanted this thread, and Jonas Falkman was sort of the character who was going to show it. And also, this is like all the books, is sort of heavy, high stakes, and he's a funny person, and so you get a little bit of comedic relief every time he shows up. And what's particularly funny about his character is he's been editing thrillers his whole life, and now he finds himself in a terrifying situation. He's in a hostage situation, and he's trying to solve it by using all the things he's learned in thrillers. And of course, none of it works, because it's like it's a little tongue-in-cheek look at thrillers, just saying like not everything is going to work if you're just an editor.
That's fantastic. I love that. Huge smile on that one. And there's a Joseph Conrad reference in there that he looks like Joseph Conrad.
Right.
Read this.
Oh, nice.
I just got this.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you can find in print anywhere. It's pretty serious, but I'm going to doing a deep dive here. I did a little bit for this last book, but just enough so I could propel the plot forward in this book with some references that not many people will get, except maybe for like 1 or 2 people in the world, but I still love to my novels anyway. But I plan on doing a deeper dive because of that experience writing my latest novel.
What are you writing about now? Or if
Yeah,
you
I go
you
back
could
to
say.
1968. It comes out October 7th. It's called Cry Havoc, obviously from the Shakespeare. But I go back to 1968 for a number of reasons. But it's Mac Visog, military, my protagonist's father in Vietnam, his journey from the SEAL teams into the CIA. But really, it's an espionage story set in and around Saigon. Of course, there's
Wow.
Moscow and there's DC and there's Bangkok and there in the mountains of Laos and there's Hanoi, but primarily an espionage thriller that's dropped there. And the inspiration obviously comes from Graham Greene, The Quiet American, from Charles McCarry, The Tears of Autumn, and John le Carre, The Honorable Schoolboy. Those were a
Wow.
long time ago. Those are two books in the 70s and one in the late 50s. So it hadn't really been done in a while. And I wanted to go back and write a book there. Also because I didn't have to think about cell phones, about cameras everywhere, about emails, about all of these things in a surveillance state, or just everything that tracks us, Teslas, or even just regular cars tracking you with
Sure.
GPSs, and our phones tracking us everywhere, and all of that. I didn't have to account for any of that, which tends to be a little bit of a, I don't want to say tedious. It's just you have to in a contemporary thriller.
Of course you have to.
Cell phones, and you can call someone and tell them, "Oh, we have new information, and don't do X, Y, or Z."
Right.
Well, in the 70s or the 80s, you can't make that call. Someone has to rush to a payphone or jump in a car, or get in the speeding train or something along those lines. And now you can just make a phone call. So I wanted to go back to 1968 where I didn't have to account for any of those things. And it took a little longer than I thought because I'm writing every sentence through the lens of 1968. So any character, I can only bring their life experience up to that point to their perspective on a situation, an event, or whatever it might be. And that ended up being a lot harder than I anticipated
I
at.
imagine. Oh,
But
that's fascinating. And I can't wait to read it.
oh,
Sounds
thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. But
And
it's the Joseph Conrad part comes in from Heart of Darkness and Apocalypse Now, and wanting to make some of these these touch points with maybe people who'd seen the film or seen the documentary about the film, or read the book, or knew something about Joseph Conrad, or knew something about that whether it was Africa or the Vietnam connection there, Congo, Vietnam, of course, with Heart of Darkness and Apocalypse Now. So I wanted to put some of those some symbology in there.
yeah,
Some people might recognize, and that, but that was more fun for me. But that's where the Joseph Conrad book came from, and
I
has
got it.
inspired me to do more of a
Well,
deep dive into that.
it's great. And that Heart of Darkness documentary is another great lesson for any creative person, where Coppola is like, this is a total fiasco. It will never work. I have failed. Fast forward 2 years to what was, I mean, I don't remember who won the Academy Award, but he certainly should have, to an absolutely brilliant movie. That's, and I've had moments like that in books. I'm sure you have too, where you just sort of go, uh-oh. You take a long walk and you figure it out.
Oh yeah, that's the best part of actually the best part, but it's something I enjoy. And it seems strange to say enjoy because of the correlation I'm going to make here. But in Iraq and Afghanistan, really, you're a creative, aggressive problem solver on the battlefield because you have an enemy who's adapting to you. You're adapting to that enemy. Whoever does it faster usually ends up on top. You're looking to capitalize on momentum. You're looking to exploit gaps in the enemy's defenses. And I do the similar thing on the page. I'm solving problems on the page of my own creation.
Yeah.
But it's
With slightly lower stakes, fortunately.
yes, exactly. I can go to sleep. I can wake up. I can
Right.
edit. I can do all
You can
those.
get a do-over if it didn't go out right. Yeah.
Exactly. And even if it gets published and no one likes it, guess what? No one's coming home in a body bag. So it's
There you go.
but I do enjoy doing that problem solving.
Want to give a very special shout out to SKB Cases for partnering on this year's Cry Havoc pub boxes. I love SKB Cases. I use them for my rifles, pistols, shotguns, bows. The kids use them for their musical instruments. We use them here for the audio-visual equipment. There are thousands of ways to use SKB Cases. And in my case, see what I did there? I use it for my books. And right here, Cry Havoc, available in hardcover, ebook, and audio. SKB, thanks so much.
Do you still outline? Did you outline your first book? Did you outline This one, I think I heard you talking about Da Vinci Code, how you outlined in your parents' laundry room or something
I
using
did.
an ironing board
There's
as
an
a
ironing board and a milk
milk
carton
crate.
a milk carton with a pillow on it was I mean, it sounds crazy, but I was visiting my parents. I was down there for about a month. They were in Sanibel, Florida, and there was no quiet, private place in the house. And the laundry room was the only place that wasn't occupied. And I took the ironing board and a milk carton and just set up the laptop and I wrote a 100-page outline for the Da Vinci Code. And it's funny, I saw the outline a couple of years ago. I thought, wow, like that was that was a huge outline, and I actually followed it. I mean, all the codes and everything were already in it. It must have been some sort of moment of flow because I don't remember a lot about writing the outline.
Wow. It's incredible that you did it like that, and I love those stories. I know everyone loves those stories because it's they're so inspiring. Like everyone thinks that you are like writing everything like you are now with the amazing library behind you and protecting the process and being able to sell everybody. But you're writing this thing when kids are banging on the door, laundry's going, I think,
Yeah,
at the
of course, and it was kind of warm in there too. For any writers out there, yes, I have the option of writing in a beautiful library, which is a great luxury. I live, many months of the year down in Costa Rica, and I was just down there renting a house that didn't have a desk, and I borrowed an old like IKEA desk that was falling apart and put it in an old bedroom with just like a kitchen chair, and that's where I wrote the final sequence of The Secret of Secrets.
wow.
So, don't get too precious about your writing process. Being a little uncomfortable isn't necessarily a bad thing. At the end of the day, you have to be in the right frame of mind, not in the right location, because your whole world is right there in front of you and in your head. And what's around you is kind of irrelevant. You could even say it's a distraction. The more comfortable you are, and you say, well, maybe I'll take a steam and get a massage. And that'll help me think. It's like, maybe not.
Just gotta do the work, be a professional, do the work. I
Exactly.
need uninterrupted time. I don't need a view. I don't need any of this stuff. I just need uninterrupted time. The interruptions are what get me, and it's
Sure.
just chaos around here, kind of constantly. When it came time for the movies, when was anything optioned before the Da Vinci Code?
No, no. I mean, nobody had read my books, much less wanted to make a movie. So when Da Vinci Code came out, it's funny. I got a call from John Calley, one of these classic Hollywood producers. First movie was A Clockwork Orange, and then you see his body of work, and you've heard of all these movies, endless success, and just the kindest man. He was at Sony Pictures, and he said we want to buy Da Vinci Code. And what's funny is I just prior gotten a call from Brian Grazer, who works with Ron Howard, who said, we want to buy Da Vinci Code because it's set in 24 hours and we want to make Robert Langdon Jack Bauer. We want Jack Bauer to solve this mystery. And I thought, no. I love Jack Bauer,
Sure.
but he's not a symbologist and I don't want him, sort of mugging monks.
Right.
So we went with Ron Howard, and it's funny. So that synergy of John Calley and Grazer and Howard and Hanks, it all came together. It was such a privilege to make that movie. I don't want to say with them because I had very little to do with it. I was more of a tourist. They were very nice. They made me feel like I had some sort of role. So I basically asked questions that in retrospect I realized were quite naive. Like, well, why can't we do this? And they said, okay, yeah, let me explain why that's a $7 million change, why that doesn't work on the screen. And so it was a whole lot of fun to watch.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think you're in there signing books, aren't you, in the background of a scene?
I am. Yes. What's really funny is I actually had a spoken sequence with Charlie Rose of all people. He was on set, and they said, Dan, you're going to be talking to Charlie Rose, and we had our lines all set. And Charlie, this is before cell phones, really. Charlie Rose had a BlackBerry, and we thought this is the most amazing thing. And he was walking along the set, looking at his BlackBerry, and he hit a piece of scaffolding about 30 seconds before we were supposed to go on, and popped his head open. They had to fix his makeup. And then we went to do the scene, and he was so dingy. He couldn't remember his lines. The scene would have been cut anyway, I assure you, because I was just as bad, totally sober. But it was funny because Ron called and said, hey, we're gonna have to cut that scene. So he said, it's always tough as a director to tell people, yeah, you didn't make the cut.
Oh,
In the background, not causing any harm to the film.
Yeah, so that's why I try to make sure that that mine are they're critical to the plot. They have to move this plot forward, so they can't cut it.
There you go.
Also, it's interesting that you said that about Charlie Rose because originally I was supposed to have my talking part on for True Believer, which we're filming now. We have about another month or two of filming, and I was supposed to be on with Bill Maher. And so I'm an author with Bill Maher, but when it came right when we got up to film, it turns out that he does it a different way when he does these cameos. There's another set for it, and there's only two guests and him instead of how he does the show, which is written it. So it ended up I didn't get to do it after all, but I might be in there another place.
Yeah, I think you've got a fair amount of clout in the upcoming series.
It's pretty fun. I'm learning it, and then screenwriting, of course, way different than what we're doing as authors here, where there's no constraints. And like you mentioned, the $7 million constraint they do about for Da Vinci Code, and typical viewer doesn't really think about that. How there are constraints with budgets and with actor availability, and locations and all sorts of things that come into play. Telling a story in a 1 hour arc. And then each one of the episodes in a season having that 1 hour arc, and then having an overarching arc for the whole season, and a lot of constraints that we don't have as authors. But hopefully, one of them for me complements the others.
I think the hardest thing is point of view. We as authors get multiple points of view. You can write from anybody's mindset or omniscient narrator, or just mount a flashback. Langdon recalled the time this happened. In the movies, you have one point of view. It's the camera. That's it. And if Langdon's hungry, in a book, he can have a passing thought that he's hungry.
Yep.
In a movie, he's got to, stare longingly at a bagel, or he's got to say like, geez, I'm hungry, or else you have no idea. Right. And it's really inefficient and difficult. And a lot of people think writing novels is like real writing, and script writing is nothing. It's just this other thing. I tell you, I have so much respect for script writers. It's as though, and I've given this example where you sort of say, somebody just painted the Mona Lisa with this whole, bunch of paints and tools. We want you to paint the Mona Lisa, but here's a pencil. You got to do it with just the pencil, and it's got to capture the same. You're like, how? And that's their skill. And it is much, much different. Amazing. It has to be incredibly efficient, and so much falls away, which is excruciating for the author. What about that scene? It's like, yeah, sorry, we can't make a 7-hour movie. Which is why I'm excited about the Netflix show, because yes, you can.
Right, there we go. Yep, exactly. Still constraints there, though. It's amazing how many constraints still come with 7 or 8 hours. But I know we're at time here, and I want to thank you so much. I got to maybe a page and a quarter of the 4 that I had for you here, but I sincerely appreciate you taking this time. I'm such a huge admirer, like I said, and I love I have so many editions of the Da Vinci Code in particular, and all the people don't know it's spawned, I think, 7 guides, and then of course critiques of the Da Vinci Code, like all these things. And I love how you're just risen above all of that.
All the chaos.
It's amazing to see. And I love I don't know how new these are, but they're
those are brand new. Yeah, they're really sharp, really modern. Just released those.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I love trade paperbacks. Probably my favorite format, but these are mostly hardcovers in here, but I do love trades for whatever reason. And they did a fantastic job with these right here. So
they're using fancy new paper. Somehow they took a very long book and made it the same thickness as the Da Vinci Code. With Secret of Secrets is 200,000 words, and they didn't change the font or anything, but they used this paper that bulks beautifully. And it's the same thickness. You hand it to somebody, every single person says, "Oh my God, that's the heaviest book I've ever felt." Yeah, there's a lot of paper in there.
Wow, that's incredible. And mine arrives here momentarily.
All right, well, you can go pick it up, and it will feel heavy.
That's amazing. And 200,000 words for people who are listening. That's a lot. That is a lot of work, and incredible. And thank you for writing it. I loved reading the PDF. I'm going to enjoy reading the hardcover even more. And once again, thank you so much for all you do for authors and readers around the world.
Jack, it's been a pleasure. Really, really fun talking to you. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Sounds great. You take care.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by
Cry Havoc, from New York Times #1 bestselling author Jack Carr. Cry Havoc, a Tom Rees thriller. Order now.
Watch a Cry Havoc teaser here, or watch another episode of the podcast here.